Initiating moisture.
The reception of Pokemon Sword and Shield from professional game journalists has completely convinced me that that shit has to be paid for. I'm on some Illuminati shit here now because there's no way that this game deserves perfect scores and high 90s across the board. Most gamers get upset about Call of Duty getting high scores despite being pretty much carbon copies year after year, but I don't know why they're not more upset about Pokemon. This is genuinely the same fucking game that Game Freak has been printing for the last couple decades. But in Sword and Shield's case, there's even less content than you're used to, and it's even lazier. Game Freak has set a new low for laziness. Half the time the fucking audio in the game doesn't even work, and when it does, it sounds like it's muffled underwater through 15 different farts in a walkie-talkie. I don't know what the fuck has gone wrong with the sound. When you beat the game, the final cutscene has a mouse cursor in it. It just feels outright lazy, and they cut the majority of the fucking Pokemon roster that Pokemon fans are used to seeing in the games to make it smaller and more streamlined, cut out a lot of the other mechanics as well. Admittedly, there are some decent quality of life changes they've made that I really did appreciate, but overall there's so much less content for an even higher price. I just don't understand how anyone can view that and be like, wow, that's 100% right there. They fucking killed it. Game Freak, standing ovation. Maybe Game Freak deserves a little sympathy. Perhaps they're just fucking trapped in a basement for most of their life, and then when Nintendo needs them to dance like some type of twisted puppeteer, they let them out of the basement. But Game Freak has been in there for decades, so all they know is the same goddamn gameplay loop from decades ago, so that's all they can really produce, and it still works for them. I don't really know the situation, but I can't imagine why they're so content with pumping out the same exact game every time. But this one, somehow they decided to just give you an even bigger fuck you by making it so much more laughably easy. It's a Pokemon game, it's made for all ages, but mainly kids can get in there and do well in the game. I get that. But this game never ever lets go of your hand. It's the most over-aggressive parent grabbing you by both hands, and it's like your fucking both arms are broken, so they're jerking you off too, because at no point in this game do they ever give you the freedom to do what you want without some type of tutorial, some type of blatant guidance, and making you play the game it wants you to play it, the way it wants you to play it. And the characters are absolute fucking dog shit. Your rival, Hop, is just terrible. At no point is it ever a challenge to beat Hop or fight Hop. It's always such a chore. You start feeling bad for the goddamn kid halfway through the game, because you know you're just going to steamroll him, and he already has depression issues at one point in the game, and then he challenges you, and you just go cockslap him again with your Pokemon roster, because all this guy catches is fucking sheep. It's a waste, and he's constantly challenging you to rival battles, and then your big bad gang, I guess your Team Rocket equivalent, but not exactly Team Rocket equivalent, but the big bad gang that you're going to keep going into, Team Yell, is just absolutely awful as well. It's a group of adults that are rabid fans of a child. It's just this fucking group of pedophiles that constantly stalk and follow around this child Pokemon trainer who they adore, and they fight on her honor. They're like fucking Twitch chat virgins defending their favorite streamer from criticism. But in this game, you constantly have to engage with them directly. You can't just ignore them. You have to keep having these meaningless, tedious battles with them at every step. And speaking of tedious, at every gym battle, they have these dumb fucking gym mission minigames that do nothing but pad out a little bit of time in the gym. It's so frustrating. It's so silly. But let's get to some things I like, because there are things I like. Obviously, the gameplay being exactly the same. It's still Pokemon gameplay, so the gameplay loop is fine. It's still fun. It is admittedly always fun and exciting to catch new Pokemon, find new Pokemon, set up the Pokemon the way you want them to with their TMs, their items, their equipment, level them up how you want. Speaking of leveling, one of the quality of life changes is XP shares on by default. Hate it or love it, it's there by default. It's just Pokemon gameplay. If you like it, you'll love it. If you don't like it, you won't like it. There's no innovation there. The only new element they've added is raids, but raids barely fucking work if you're playing online, because what they have is called a stamp system, and the stamp system takes like 10 goddamn minutes to refresh your stamps. Even if you do like disconnect and reconnect to the internet, your stamps won't refresh for 10 minutes, so by the time you see a stamp, that shit's been over for 50 minutes by now. You're never gonna get into a raid consistently unless you're playing with friends. It's both a limitation of the awful Nintendo Online that for some reason they cannot make better. They just have this archaic system for online gameplay that I can't fucking stand. It's just laughable. It's so primitive it makes me sick to my stomach. And coupled with the stamp system for finding your raids, and you have a recipe for disaster and boredom. And if you're trying to do an online battle, I hope you're prepared for a lot of sitting with your fist in your asshole, because the amount of times that a communication pops up and then you end up waiting a minute for that to go through because the Nintendo Online lost, control. Nintendo forgot what internet was for a moment, so you have to wait there for it to reestablish the connection. It's frustrating. It is absolutely frustrating. Anything online is just frustrating, and that's entirely because of Nintendo Online. I can't even blame Pokemon Sword and Shield itself, because Nintendo just doesn't even know what the fucking internet is, it feels like. As Smash Bros. Was plagued by this same problem, and the stamps just make it even worse in this game. Also, the online makes the wild lag, which is basically your free roam area. That shit lags really hard if you're connected online. You'll get some big frame drops and a lot of pop in, pop out shit. Just at every step, it feels so messy, incomplete, and clunky. I have no idea why they put this on the Switch. This could easily be on the DS. There's really nothing here that shows me that it uses the power of the Switch. Yes, it is a visual improvement, and yes, some of the animations do look very good. I actually quite like the look of Dynamaxing and some of the attacks from Dynamaxing. I think they look very nice on the Switch, although the Dynamax animation taking 20 seconds every time is a bit frustrating. But yes, at times it does look very nice, but that isn't that huge of an improvement visually to justify the extra $20. And the new Pokemon certainly aren't going to be enough to persuade you to get the game. There's only a handful of new Pokemon that I think are really nice looking Pokemon, very well designed, and they look pretty fucking cool. There's definitely some of those in here. But then there's also the majority of the roster that looks like absolute shit. That it seems like no effort went into it, that they were just sitting around the office and pointing at things saying, that'll be a Pokemon, that'll be a Pokemon. Is that a fucking rock outside? That's gonna be a Pokemon. There's a rock Pokemon in this game that is actually just a stack of rocks to look like Stonehenge. Even more insulting, there's a Pokemon in this game that is just a teacup. It's fucking stupid. The new Pokemon, on the most part, aren't very good. They're not justifying getting rid of their whole roster to put an emphasis on this group of lame fucking characters, these rejects. But there are some good ones in there. I will definitely say I liked some of them. But overall, I just don't see, under any circumstance, this game getting glowing reviews. Now, it's perfectly fine to like this game, and I totally understand why you would. I still fucking love the gameplay. But I can recognize some objective flaws in the game, and also in my personal opinion, if you're going to make a new entry into a franchise, there needs to be a justification for this new entry. Making a carbon copy of the same fucking game, I don't think is something that should be praised or even really accepted. To me, that's just a greedy move, slapping a fresh coat of paint on something without really making a meaningful change to it. And the only thing this game offers is raids that only work with friends, not online, which is supposed to be the biggest component of that. But obviously if you have friends, the raids work, and those work out nicely with your friends. But when you're going from a handheld like a DS to a console like the Switch, there's a certain expectation that needs to be met. This is the first Pokemon game that we've ever gotten on a console, so the expectation would be something exciting, something different, something that uses the power of the Switch to put a fresh take on the established formula and the established franchise, but you don't get that. What you get is the exact same game that you're used to getting, but a little more simplified and with less in it. That's not a subjective statement. You are getting the same product, but you're getting less of it for a higher price. And that's not a flaw I think should be overlooked. You can still love the game despite that, and I totally understand the people that do. But that is still an objective flaw of this game. You are getting what you've always got, but less of it, and then some of its components genuinely just don't even fucking work. Popping this bad boy into the moist meter, I'm giving it an even 50%. And the only reason it's at a 50%, which I consider an average game, is because the gameplay loop is still very satisfying. But I do think when you're making a new entry into a franchise, you need to have certain level of improvements to justify its existence. Otherwise, why not just make it a DLC or change certain things about the already existing game? So you need to be able to look at the previous entry and the new one and compare the two, saying, what did the new one do differently that the last one didn't? I love the gameplay in the previous one, and I still like it in this one, but is there anything different about it? And if there's nothing different, well, why did you make it in the first place? It's the same problem Call of Duty had. The community used to be outraged when Call of Duty year after year would get very high scores with very minimal improvements or differences between them. Pokemon's the same case. There really needs to be at least some level of trying to make things different between entries. And their solution for this one was to take shit away. That was their spin on the gameplay to make it more simplified. That's not exactly the most fun fucking way of doing things. Hey, here's the gameplay you know and love. Let's just give you less of it. That's not exactly the way to go about it, in my opinion. But it is still fun at its core. And yeah, that's about it. See ya.